First part of the movie where he's in New York and he makes his way down the street, goes into a store, and all exterior stuff.
All we doing is putting the mirror up and showing you that yes, we saw it, yes, we got it, and yes, we're doing it.
A 19-year-old rapper with no acting credits walks into a room to support his friend's audition. He's not on the list. He's not supposed to be there. 20 minutes later, he walks out with the lead role in a film that will define him forever and set the tone for the rest of his short, explosive life. That rapper's name is Tupac Shakur. The role is Roland Bishop, and the movie is Juice. 30-plus years later, most people know the poster. They know the soundtrack. They know the scene where Bishop tells Q, "I don't give a fuck about you." But almost nobody knows what actually happened behind the camera. The fights, the frame-out audition, the real killing outside a Chicago theater, and the ending Paramount forced onto the film at the last minute. 28 secrets. Some will make you rethink the entire film. One of them might make you angry. Stick around because number 25 involves something that happened in real life that Paramount never wanted you to know the full story on. Let's get into it. Secret number 1. The script was 9 years old before anyone would touch it. Ernest Dickerson and Gerard Brown wrote the screenplay for Juice in the early 1980s, right after Dickerson graduated from NYU Film School. Nobody wanted it. Studios told him flat out, "Nobody wants to see this movie." It sat in a drawer for nearly a decade while Dickerson built his career elsewhere. So how does a script that Hollywood rejected for 9 straight years end up becoming one of the most quoted hip-hop films of all time? Ask yourself that as we go, because the answer says a lot about who was actually running the industry in the early 90s. Secret number 2. Dickerson wasn't even supposed to be a director. Before Juice, Ernest Dickerson was Spike Lee's cinematographer, the guy behind the camera on She's Gotta Have It, Do the Right Thing, and Malcolm X. Juice was his directorial debut. He wasn't hired to direct someone else's vision. He was finally getting the chance to shoot his own script 9 years after he wrote it. Secret number 3. New Jack City and Boys and the Hood basically saved the movie. Juice almost never got made until 2 other films changed the math. When New Jack City and Boys and the Hood both became hits in 1991, suddenly every studio wanted in on urban drama. Island World Productions agreed to fund the film's $4 to $5 million budget, and once cameras started rolling, a bidding war broke out. Paramount won distribution rights with a promised $10 million advertising budget. Without those 2 films succeeding first, would Juice have ever left the drawer? Probably not. Timing didn't just help this movie, timing built it. Secret number 4. Tupac wasn't even auditioning. Here's where it gets interesting. In early 1991, Tupac Shakur was a roadie-turned-hype man for Digital Underground, going by the name Tupac, trying to catch a break in both music and acting. He had 0 film credits. When his group got a call to audition actors for Juice, it wasn't Tupac who was invited. It was his friend and fellow Digital Underground member, Money B. Secret number 5. A different rapper almost became Bishop. Before Tupac ever read a line of dialogue, another iconic 90s rapper walked into that audition room to play Bishop. And it wasn't him. It was Anthony Criss, known to the world as Tretch, from Naughty by Nature. Tretch had been recommended by Queen Latifah herself. He was the one they were seriously looking at for the role that would define Tupac's career. So what happened? How does the guy everyone was watching lose the role to the guy nobody invited? Secret number 6. Tupac's friend basically handed him the role. While riding around New York in a limo attending press events, Money B was reading through the Juice script, studying for the part of Steel, the role he was actually up for. But one character jumped off the page at him. He turned to Tupac and told him to look at Bishop, saying the character was practically written for him. Money B passed him the script and told him to come to the audition and read for that part instead. Think about that for a second. If Money B hadn't looked up from those pages at that exact moment, does Tupac Shakur ever become Bishop at all? Secret number 7. He threw a chair to get the part. When Tupac showed up, he wasn't even on the casting list. He asked to read anyway. According to people in the room, he had already memorized the entire script cold, not just his lines, the whole thing. During his read, he threw a chair. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't asked for. It was Tupac deciding in real time what Bishop would actually do. That single unscripted moment is often cited as the moment the room realized they weren't watching an audition anymore. They were watching Bishop. Secret number 8. The casting director cried when she told him. Casting director Jackie Brown described watching Tupac read and immediately going to get the director and writer so they could see it too. After his callback, producers turned to her almost in unison and asked if they could tell him he had the job. When she brought him back in and told him, he grabbed her, hugged her, and broke down crying. A kid with no acting resume, who wasn't even supposed to be in the building, ends up in tears over a role he wasn't invited to read for. How often does that actually happen in this industry? Secret number 9. Multiple bigger names auditioned and lost. Tupac wasn't just competing with Tretch. Daryl Mitchell and Donald Faison also auditioned for the role of Bishop. All of them were passed over. Every single one of them had more visibility than Tupac did at that moment, and none of them got the part. Secret number 10. Tupac got his rivals cameo roles. Once Tupac landed the lead, he didn't leave his friends behind. He helped Tretch land a cameo as a member of the rival gang led by Radams. Donald Faison, who'd also auditioned for Bishop, ended up with a small role as a high school student. The guy who beat them for the part turned around and put them in the movie anyway. Secret number 11. Nobody knew he was trained. Here's something almost nobody talks about. Tupac had actually studied theater formally at the Baltimore School for the Arts. His director, Ernest Dickerson, said the cast and crew only found this out later. They didn't know going in. Everyone assumed they were watching raw, undisciplined talent. In reality, they were watching a trained actor who had simply never had the opportunity to prove it on camera before. Secret number 12. Bishop's entire psychology was Tupac's own invention. Tupac didn't just play Bishop as written. He built a backstory that wasn't necessarily fully spelled out in the script. In his own words, he described Bishop as psychotic, insecure, and short-tempered, and explained that in the film, Bishop's father had been in prison and was disrespected there, and that unresolved wound is what drove Bishop through the entire story. According to Tupac, everything Bishop did, every act of violence, traced back to a desperate need for the respect his father never got. That's not just acting. That's constructing a psychological engine for a fictional killer from a 19-year-old with no formal film experience. Does that change how you see the character the next time you watch it? Secret number 13. He underplayed the villain on purpose. Most first-time actors playing a violent character would go big, yelling, screaming, chewing scenery. Tupac did the opposite. Writer Gerard Brown recalled that Tupac chose to go under instead, playing Bishop's menace quietly rather than loudly. Brown said it was the smartest possible choice, because a character that unhinged screaming through every scene would have become a cartoon. The stillness is what made him terrifying. Secret number 14. Filming took just 6 weeks. Principal photography began on March 13, 1991, on location in New York City, and the entire shoot wrapped in roughly 6 weeks. The production shot on real Harlem streets rather than a studio backlot, which is part of why the film still feels so grounded decades later. The arcade, the record store, the apartment buildings, all of it was the actual neighborhood, not a set built to resemble it. 6 weeks to produce a film that's still being dissected and referenced in hip-hop culture more than 3 decades later. Secret number 15. Omar Epps actually learned to DJ. Omar Epps, playing Quincy Q. Powell, didn't fake his turntable skills. He trained to spin records before production even started, so a lot of what you see him doing on camera in those DJ scenes is authentic, not a stunt double or camera trick. Secret number 16. This was the film debut for 3 of the 4 leads. Juice marked the very first film acting roles for Omar Epps, Khalil Kain, and Tupac Shakur. 3/4 of the main cast had never been in a movie before this one. Jermaine Hopkins rounded out the group as Steele. Here's a fact most people miss entirely. Juice wasn't a random word picked for a catchy title. In the world of the film, it's street slang for power, respect, standing. The thing all 4 of these young men are chasing in different ways. Bishop wants it through fear. Q wants it through his talent behind the turntables. Paramount built the entire ad campaign around one question: how far will you go to get it? That wasn't just marketing copy. It's the actual thesis of the movie. Every plot turn, the robbery, the murders, the betrayals, is really just 4 different answers to that one question. So ask yourself, out of Bishop, Q, Raheem, and Steele, who actually got their juice? And was it worth what it cost them? Secret number 17. 2 future icons had small roles you might have missed. Look closely and you'll catch 2 names that would go on to become massive. Queen Latifah appears as the Rough House MC, and Samuel L. Jackson shows up in a noticeable role as a pool hall owner. 2 future Hollywood and hip-hop legends, tucked into the margins of a film most people only remember for its 4 leads. There's also a much less glamorous story buried in the film's paperwork. A year after release, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees summoned Paramount and Island World Productions to arbitration over payments the union said were owed to crew members. Some of those workers had reportedly agreed to deferred, below-minimum rate deals on the promise they'd be paid in full, plus bonuses, once the film turned a profit. And it did. Juice was reportedly the 6th most profitable picture of the entire year based on its budget-to-box office ratio. Yet Island World and Paramount denied owing the union any additional money. So while this film's legacy is about 4 actors becoming stars, there's a quieter story underneath it about the crew who built the movie and may never have seen the payoff they were promised. Secret number 18. Tupac kept everyone laughing and everyone on edge. When Juice hit theaters, reviews weren't unanimous. Roger Ebert gave the film 3 out of 4 stars, describing it as a story with the quality of a nightmare, where foolish young men try to out-macho each other until they get trapped in a violent situation that permanently alters their lives. Entertainment. Weekly's Owen Gleiberman gave it a B+, praising how the film captured 4 young characters desperately trying to seize control over their own surroundings. Not every critic was as generous. Variety called it technically superior, but narratively flawed, and one Houston publication later called the climactic ending among the worst in cinematic history. But almost every review, positive or negative, agreed on one thing: the performances, especially Tupac's, were the reason to watch. That intensity wasn't limited to the screen. Cast members have described Tupac as constantly performing off-camera too, doing spot-on impressions, including a version of Al Pacino's Tony Montana from Scarface, and giving everyone on set playful nicknames. But that same energy had another side. According to castmate Jermaine Hopkins, if you upset Tupac, he could disappear from set entirely, sometimes ending up in the neighborhood arguing with locals. Secret number 19. A prank turned into an actual fight. Jermaine Hopkins once admitted to pulling a prank on Tupac during filming, telling him he'd been fired from the movie. It wasn't true. When Tupac found out he'd been lied to, it escalated into a real physical altercation between the 2 co-stars. A joke about losing the role that changed his life turned into a fistfight on set. Secret number 20. His trailer became the unofficial hangout. Tupac's movie trailer, meant to be his private space between takes, turned into a revolving door of castmates and friends. People came and went constantly, and by most accounts the space was rarely quiet and rarely empty. For a first-time actor, there wasn't much isolation to retreat into. Secret number 21. A newspaper story on set inspired one of his biggest songs. While shooting Juice, Tupac was simultaneously writing his debut album, Tupacalypse Now. According to Omar Epps, one morning Tupac read a newspaper story about a mother abandoning her newborn in the trash, and was so shaken by it that he wrote the song Brenda's Got a Baby that same day. One of the most devastating songs of his early career was born on the set of the film that launched his acting life. Secret number 22. Hank Shockley scored his first feature film, Here Too. Juice wasn't just a breakthrough for its actors. Rap producer Hank Shockley, known for his work with Public Enemy's Bomb Squad, made his feature film composing debut on this soundtrack, credited alongside the Bomb Squad. He also produced the soundtrack through his own newly formed label, a joint venture with MCA Records. The soundtrack itself became a cultural artifact in its own right, helping set the template that countless urban dramas would follow for the rest of the decade, pairing gritty, on-screen realism with an equally hard-edged hip-hop score instead of a traditional orchestral one. Secret number 23. Paramount forced a different ending. After seeing an early cut of the film, Paramount pushed Dickerson to change the ending so it would carry, in their words, more of a measure of hope. Dickerson complied. It's not confirmed whether this required new reshoots, but the ending audiences saw in theaters was not the one Dickerson originally cut. What do you think the original, darker ending might have looked like? Would it have hit harder, or would audiences never have connected with it the same way? Secret number 24. The poster sparked a real controversy before the film even opened. Paramount's original marketing image showed the four leads bathed in a blue haze, with Tupac Shakur holding a handgun, and the film's title splashed across it in red. Critics immediately pointed out that blue and red were the signature colors of the Bloods and Crips. Paramount ended up airbrushing the gun out of the poster, but the unaltered version had already leaked to television stations and was broadcast on the news before the change ever reached most theaters. The Los Angeles-based group Mothers Against Gangs in Communities publicly protested the campaign. Secret number 25. Real violence broke out at theaters across the country on opening night. This is the one people don't talk about enough. Juice opened on Martin Luther King Day weekend, January 17, 1992, in over 1,000 theaters. That same night, shootings, stabbings, and fights broke out at theaters in at least 8 states. In Chicago, a 16-year-old girl was killed by a stray bullet outside a theater showing the film. Police attributed it to a street altercation between rival gangs rather than the movie itself. In a Philadelphia suburb, an 18-year-old man was shot in the neck and left paralyzed after the final showing. There were reported woundings in New York City and at a theater in East Lansing, Michigan, where Saturday screenings were canceled entirely afterward. More incidents were reported in Boston, Omaha, Anchorage, and North Little Rock. In one Anchorage theater, a fight broke out and staff physically stopped the film. Paramount had actually anticipated trouble. After violence marred the openings of both New Jack City and Boys and the Hood the previous year, the studio offered to pay for extra security at any theater that wanted it, and even made extra prints available so venues could add screens if lines got out of hand. It didn't stop what happened. Here's the question worth sitting with. Was the violence actually caused by the film, or was it caused by young people from different, often rival neighborhoods being pulled into unfamiliar theaters, all at once, on the same night? Police in most of these cities pointed to the second explanation. Paramount called them isolated incidents. Not everyone agreed. Secret number 26. Boston's gunfire had nothing to do with the movie's story. In one particularly strange twist, gunfire broke out inside a Boston theater during a screening, but according to witnesses, it wasn't sparked by anything in the film. Police were searching for a mugger who had robbed a patron in the restroom, and the resulting chaos led to shots being fired into the ceiling and a wall. Investigators later found a .38 caliber revolver with spent rounds. No one was hurt, but it shows how quickly the narrative around movie violence outran the actual facts on the ground. Secret number 27. The film was later cited in an actual murder trial. 2 years after its release, in 1994, Juice was referenced in a murder trial in Cardiff, Wales. 3 young gang members on trial for kicking a young man to death reportedly claimed they were mimicking the film, a movie made to warn young black men about the dangers of chasing respect through violence, ended up being cited by defendants trying to explain a real killing an ocean away. Secret number 28. Despite everything, it became one of the most profitable films of the year. For all the controversy, the film opened to roughly $8 million in its first weekend and went on to gross $20.1 million worldwide, against a production budget of only $4 to $5 million. Based on that ratio of budget to box office, Juice was reportedly the 6th most profitable film released in 1992. A story nobody wanted for 9 years ended up outperforming films with 10 times its budget. That success landed differently for everyone involved. Before Juice, Omar Epps' mother wasn't exactly thrilled about her son chasing an acting career, even after he'd already booked the lead role of Q. It wasn't until the film's premiere that everything clicked for her. She was seated at the event just one seat away from Diana Ross. In that single moment, watching her son at a real Hollywood premiere, sitting near one of the biggest stars in music, she finally understood this wasn't a phase. It was real. It's a small detail buried inside a much bigger story, but it says something about how sudden all of this was, for the actors, and for the families watching from the sidelines who had no idea what their kids were about to walk into. The legacy nobody expected. Here's the part that lingers. Tupac's castmate Jermaine Hopkins once put it best when he said Bishop wasn't Tupac, but Bishop's attitude absolutely lived inside him, and there were real situations that could bring that side of him out. Bishop was words on a page. It was Tupac's own lived experience, his upbringing, his instincts, his pain, that made those words breathe. That line is exactly why this film still matters. Bishop wasn't a costume Tupac put on and took off. Watching Juice today, knowing everything that came after in his life and career, it's almost impossible not to wonder how much of Bishop's rage he was still carrying with him when the cameras stopped rolling. And the character didn't stay contained inside the film either. For decades, rappers have referenced Bishop and Juice as shorthand for a specific kind of dangerous charisma, the friend who's fun until he isn't, the one whose need for respect eventually outweighs everyone else's safety, including his own. Film critics have pointed to Dickerson's decision to cast Tupac as the moment that sealed the film's identity, arguing that his presence alone gave the movie an authenticity no other casting choice could have delivered, while the intensity he brought to Bishop turned what could have been an unbelievable character into someone who felt painfully real. That's the strange part of this whole story. A script nobody wanted for 9 years, a role nobody invited him to audition for, a performance built on a backstory he invented himself, played quieter than anyone expected. And somehow, all of that combined into the single most cited debut performance in the history of hip-hop cinema. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Did playing Bishop change who Tupac became? Or did Tupac only get the role because that fire was already in him before he ever walked into that audition room? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this is the first time you're hearing the real story behind Juice, make sure you're subscribed, because there are a lot more of these buried behind the scenes of the movies you thought you already knew.